Nice place. Wow. I've been hearing about this one. Great job. Great job. Thank you very much for being here. It's an honor and very important time in our country. A lot of things are happening, and I think when it all ends up, it's going to end up very good for everybody. It's an honor to be at Gateway Church with the Attorney General, our great Attorney General, William Barr. Thank you. And my friend Ben Carson, who's done a fantastic job at HUD, Secretary. And a young star, Jerome Adams, General. Where is Jerome? Jerome? Along with a lot of my friends out in the audience. In fact, a lot of the great political leaders from Texas, I see. Some great, great friends, and I want to thank you all for being here. Faith leaders, members of law enforcement, so important. We want law and order. We have to have a lot of good things, but we have to have law and order. Got to have some strength. You have to have strength. You have to do what you have to do. And you look at Seattle. We just came in. We just see over the screen, and we've been hearing about it. Bill and I were talking about it. The law and order. Look at what happened in Seattle. They took over a big city, Seattle. It's a chunk of it, a big chunk. Can't happen. That couldn't happen here, I don't think, in the state of Texas, could it? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I want to thank Pastors Robert Morris and Steve Dullen. They're great people. Great people with a great reputation, I have to say that. Great reputation. And Gateway Church, the team has been incredible in hosting us. And I'd now like to ask Pastor Morris and Bishop Jackson to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Lord, we need you. We need you at this time in our country. And I thank you for our president. I thank you, Lord, for our leaders. I thank you, thank you, thank you. I know in the Bible that when something was emphasized, it was repeated. Holy, holy, holy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lord, that we are about to bring tremendous progress to a problem that's been here for a long time. And I thank you for this administration. And Lord, we pray your blessings, your guidance today on this meeting. In Jesus' name.
Jesus' name. Father, we thank you so much for what you're doing today. You have revealed so many things that are untoward, even evil. But we ask, according to Isaiah 50, verse 4, that you would give us the tongue of the learned, that we should know how to speak to the heart of this nation. Give us a word in season to him that's weary, and waken us morning by morning, God, that we would hear and speak. We have a great, courageous president who's a problem solver. And let him speak as your mouthpiece and act as your instrument. And we thank you for this time. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Bishop, and thank you very much, Pastor. That's great. And we're going to be discussing some pretty important things today, I think. It's all important, but the timing of this is very appropriate. This was set up actually a long time ago, but the timing is very appropriate. We are here to listen to community and faith leaders. We're going to be hearing from a lot of the good ones, some of the great ones, but a lot of the good ones, and to present our vision of advancing the cause of justice and freedom. From day one, I've been fighting for the forgotten men and women of America, and I think we've been doing a great job of it. We've been doing a lot in many other ways, but it gets lost a little bit sometimes. Bishop, you know that. It gets lost. We've done so much, and a lot of the things that we've done that we're very proud of gets lost. Like we got criminal justice reform passed, and they've been trying to do it for many years, and they haven't been able to. It's all passed. We secured permanent and record-setting funding for HBCUs, that's historically Black colleges and universities. It's all done. We created tens of thousands of jobs with opportunity zones. Tim Scott, and we had a great senator from South Carolina that many of you know. He came with an idea, and I thought it was a great idea, and we got it done. A lot of people said that could never happen, but nobody thought it would be successful like it is. Tens of thousands of jobs and investment in communities where that money wouldn't go. And we achieved the lowest black unemployment in the history of our country prior to the plague coming in from China. And we'll get it back again soon. It'll happen soon. That'll happen very soon. In recent days, there's been vigorous discussion about how to ensure fairness, equality, and justice for all of our people. Unfortunately, there are some trying to stoke division and to push an extreme agenda which we won't go for, that will produce only more poverty, more crime, more suffering. This includes radical efforts to defund, dismantle, and disband the police. They want to get rid of the police forces. They actually want to get rid of it. And that's what they'd do, and that's where they'd go. And you know that because at the top position, there's not going to be much leadership. There's not much leadership left. Instead, we have to go the opposite way. We must invest more energy and resources in police training and recruiting and community engagement. We have to respect our police. We have to take care of our police. They're protecting us, and if they're allowed to do their job, they'll do a great job. And you always have a bad apple no matter where you go. You have bad apples, and there are not too many of them. And I can tell you there are not too many of them in the police department. We all know a lot of members of the police. I was listening today, and a friend of mine was on, very important person, said some of the best people he's ever met are policemen, law enforcement people. And they're taking care of people that in many cases they never even met before. And at great danger, at great risk. They get shot for no reason whatsoever other than they're wearing blue. They get knifed. You saw that the other night. It was a horrible thing. But there is no opportunity without safety. In Chicago, 48 people were shot and 18 people were killed in one day, Sunday, May 31st. Think of that. 48 people shot, 18 people killed. You don't hear about it too much. Every child should be able to grow up in a safe community, free from violence and fear. They've taken a lot of the police protection away in Chicago, and they have great, great police in Chicago. I know Chicago very well, but they're not allowed to do what they can do better than anybody. They could do the job very easily. Americans are good and virtuous people. We have to work together to confront bigotry and prejudice wherever they appear, but we'll make no progress and heal no wounds by falsely labeling tens of millions of decent Americans as racist or bigots. We have to get everybody together. We have to be in the same path, I think, Pastor. If we don't do that, we have problems, and we'll do that. We'll do it. I think we're going to do it very easily. It'll go quickly, and it'll go very easily. We have so many different elements of strength in this country. We have such potential in this country. We have the greatest potential. We have the greatest country in the world. But we get off subject. We start thinking about things that don't matter or don't matter much. And the important things we don't even discuss. But we're here to discuss some very important things today. Politicians make false charges, and they're trying to distract from their own failed records. They have some very bad records. And these are usually the ones that cause the problems or can't solve the problems. These are the same politicians who shipped our jobs away and took tremendous advantage of all Americans, but African-American middle class. So much of that wealth and that money and those jobs went to China and other countries, and they get trapped. They get trapped. They get trapped in a government morass. They get trapped in bad government schools. So I'm going to be announcing 4 steps to build safety and opportunity and dignity. First, we're aggressively pursuing economic development in minority communities. We're doing it very powerfully. We've done it with opportunity zones, but we're going to go above that. At the heart of this effort is increasing access to capital for small businesses, and that's with minority owners in black communities. And we're going to get it done, and it should have been done a long time ago. It's been very difficult, very, very difficult for some people, been unfairly difficult. Second, we're confronting the healthcare disparities, including addressing chronic conditions and investing substantial sums in minority-serving medical institutions. We have medical institutions in some areas of our country that are a disgrace. I was going to say not up to standard. They're much worse than not up to standard. They're a disgrace. Take care of it. Third, we're working to finalize an executive order that will encourage police departments nationwide to meet the most current professional standards for the use of force, including tactics for de-escalation. Also, we'll encourage pilot programs that allow social workers to join certain law enforcement officers so that they work together. We'll take care of our police. We're not defunding police. If anything, we're going the other route. We're going to make sure that our police are well-trained, perfectly trained, they have the best equipment.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we have heard, because I know a lot of the people in the audience and they're professionals and what they do, and they're successful people, and we're hearing things that are not even thinkable. I've never even heard of this before last week. It was like, it started about a week ago where I heard they want to close up all police forces. That's what their attack on a very liberal governor in the state of Washington is. We want the police force closed. It's not like they want to sort of bring a little money into something else. They want it actually closed. And I'm thinking, what happens late at night when you make that call to 911 and there's nobody there? What do you do? Whether you're white, black, or anybody else, I mean, what do? You're dialing and there's somebody breaking into a house and it happens to be a violent person. There are violent people around, Pastor. Even you will admit that, right? We want to think the best, but you have some very violent people. And when they're breaking into your house at 12 o'clock in the evening and you're sitting there and you don't have a police force, they're actually talking about not having a police force. Well, that's not happening with us. We're going to have stronger police forces because that's what you need. In Minneapolis, they went through 3 nights of hell, and then I was insistent on having the National Guard go in and do their work. It was like a miracle. It just, everything stopped. And I'll never forget the scene. It's not supposed to be a beautiful scene, but to me it was, after you watch policemen running out of a police precinct. And it wasn't their fault. They wanted to do what they had to do, but they weren't allowed to do anything. It wasn't really their fault, but they were running down the street. They weren't allowed to do what they're trained to do. And they took over the precinct. They burned it, essentially burned it down. I'm pretty good at construction. I want to tell you, that was almost what we call a complete renovation, if you're lucky. And it was a very sad thing. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. But we are very proud of the fact that I called, I said, I'm sorry, we have to have them go in. And they went in, and it was like a knife cutting butter right through, boom. I'll never forget, you saw the scene on that road, wherever it may be, in the city, Minneapolis. They were lined up, boom, they just walked straight. And yes, there was some tear gas and probably some other things, and the crowd dispersed and they went through. By the end of that evening, and it was a short evening, everything was fine, and you didn't hear too much about that location having problems anymore. They went to other locations, and the same thing would happen. As an example, Seattle would be so easy to solve. Would be so easy to solve. We have a governor here of a great state. It's called Texas. He would solve it very easily, as would other of your political leaders, including your lieutenant governor. They would solve it very easily. It's a lot of it's common sense. I don't even think it's courage. I think it's probably more courageous the other way, because I wouldn't want to be doing it the other way. It's very unsafe. So I just want to tell you that we're working on a lot of different elements having to do with law, order, safety, comfort, control. But we want safety. We want compassion. We want everything. What happened 2 weeks ago was a disgrace when you see that. What happened on numerous occasions over the last 2 weeks, people were killed. A number of people were killed, and it was very, very terrible and very, very unfair. A number of them were police officers. And it was a very unfair situation. We don't want to see that. And with strength, you wouldn't even have that. They wouldn't be in a position to do the kind of damage that they've done. They've destroyed people. They've destroyed businesses. They've destroyed African-American owned small businesses that Hopefully they're going to come back. We're providing funding for a lot of small businesses, and hopefully we'll be able to get everybody online and get funding to be able to open up their stores and their small businesses again. But we're working to finalize an executive order that will encourage police departments nationwide to meet the most current professional standards of force. And that means force, but force with compassion. But if you're going to have to really do a job, if somebody's really bad, you're going to have to do it with real strength, real power. And I said, and people said, oh, I don't know if we like that expression. I said, we have to dominate the streets. You can't let that happen, what happened in New York City, the damage they've done. You have to dominate the streets. And I was criticized for that statement. I made the statements, we have to dominate the street. And they said, oh, that's such a terrible thing. Well, guess what? You know who dominated the streets? People that you don't want to dominate the streets. And look at the damage they did. So I'll stick with that. And I think most of the people in this room, maybe every person in this room will stick with that. And we're doing it with compassion. If you think about it, we're dominating the street with compassion because we're saving lives and we're saving businesses. We're saving families from being wiped out after working hard for 20 and 30 years. I saw the one woman, she worked 35 years building a store, and in one night it was totally wiped out. It's terrible. And fourth, we're renewing our call on Congress to finally enact school choice now. School choice is a big deal. Because access to education is the civil rights issue of our time, and I've heard that for the last, I would say, year, but it really is. It's the civil rights issue of our time. When you can have children go to a school where their parents want them to go, and it creates competition, and other schools fight harder because all of a sudden they say, wow, we're losing it, we have to fight harder, it gets better. So many different ways. But there are groups of people against that. You have unions against it, you have others against it, and they're not against it for the right reasons. They're against it for a lot of the wrong reasons, and we're going to get that straight. Now, we've done a lot of it. We've had tremendous success with choice. We had choice in a lot of ways. We also have choice in the military. You know, before I came here, the vets would wait online, Pastor. They'd be waiting. It wouldn't be acceptable to you. I know it wouldn't be acceptable to the bishop. I know it's not going to be acceptable to you. They'd wait for 4 or 5 weeks to get online, a vet, where they were sick, they were feeling badly, and they'd get online and they'd say, there's a 6-day wait, sir. There's a 2-week wait, there's a 1-month wait. And you'd have people online that weren't very ill, and they'd be terminally ill before they got to see a doctor. They'd die. And for years and years, they've been trying to get veterans' choice. That means if you can't get to a doctor reasonably quickly, you go outside, you go to a local doctor around where you live, and the government pays the bill. And by the way, it sounds expensive. It's very cheap by comparison. It's actually much better. Now, most importantly, we take care of our vets. By far most importantly. But it's one of those many cases where it's actually less costly and better. Sometimes you'll see a building, it costs less money than another building that costs more because the one that built the one that costs more, this one looks better. The one that's cheaper, it looks better. They say, how much more did you spend for that building? Actually, we spent less. You can do that. It's called, you have to know what you're doing, if you know what you're doing. That's only good for the real estate people in here, of which there are plenty, by the way. So I just want to thank everybody. This is a tremendous place. This is a great city. This is a great, great city, and with tremendous people and tremendous pride. And I say the same for the state of Texas. You know, your governor came to me and he said, when you had your bad hurricane 2 years ago, I gave so much money to Texas, more. He kept coming, more. How about here? How about? So finally, you know, though, we took good care of Texas. Is that right? We took such good care of Texas. They were looking for the next hurricane. They said, when's the next hurricane? But they had a big one. And they say you had the largest water dump ever. It just didn't stop. It came in, and you thought it was gone, and then it went back out, and it reloaded, right? And it happened 3 times. And your governor came and he wanted to build a barrier so that water would hit the barrier, wouldn't come into certain parts of Texas. He called me and said, sir, I just have one more request. This is after we gave $28 billion. So $28 billion. I mean, we watch the pennies, but when it comes to Texas, we don't watch them too closely, okay? And he said, Governor Abbott, he said, just one more request, and it's a very small one, sir. We have a way of building a wall. It goes up and down. It moves with the tides. I said, that sounds expensive to me. It moves with the tides, and it's not a lot of money. Could I ask you to do me one small favor and approve it? I said, how much is it? Sir, it's only $10 billion. And I said, start working on it, right? I said, start working on it, because we can do things to get rid of those. You get hit pretty hard here. They get hit pretty hard here, don't they? Were you affected very much when you had, during the hurricanes itself?
We had a lot of people who were displaced that came to this area.
Yeah. Well, we took good care of everybody. So I just want to say this is one of my favorite places. I know we're doing very well here. During the last process, they kept saying that Texas is too close to call. And friends of mine in Texas would say, it's not too close to call. You're going to win in a landslide. And I said, well, they keep saying. Yeah. We had one man got on television, actually, and he said, I don't know where you come from, but I don't think this is too close to call. I think he's going to win by a lot. And we won by a lot. It was 8 o'clock, and the polls were closed, and they said, Donald Trump has won the state of Texas. And he said it simultaneously, so. And we're doing good here again. But, you know, one of the things I have to say, because this is big oil territory, I think we've done a fantastic job with bringing back the oil in a rapid fashion. That looked pretty bad. That looked pretty bad. You had a case, you had a couple of hours where if you bought a barrel of oil, you bought it for $37, as if they gave you 37, okay? There's never been a thing like that ever. Now I see that it's getting close to $40 a barrel, and you're back in business, and we got it done fast, and we got Russia together with Saudi Arabia, and they cut production, and they got it back fast, and we're very, very proud of it. The supply changed rapidly with COVID-19 or whatever you want to call it. I'd never heard so many names. You have about 30 names you can call this thing. I call it the plague from China. It's a plague. And it's not good. And it's not good, and it's could have been stopped. It could have been stopped in China, but they decided not to do that, and we'll have to figure that one out, won't we? So I just want to thank everybody very much for being here. This is a very spectacular place, and I want to introduce Attorney General Barr and Secretary Carson to say a few words, along with the Surgeon General, who has been a real young star in the administration. And please, if I could, Bill, take over, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for convening this discussion. And I'd like to thank the many impressive leaders, civic leaders, religious leaders, and colleagues from law enforcement who are here. That ghastly spectacle in Minneapolis was really jarring to the whole nation, and it forced us to confront and think about, reflect on longstanding issues in our nation. Those issues obviously relate to the relationship between law enforcement and the African American community. But just to step back a little and take a broader view initially, I've been thinking about how do we achieve the full American dream for all communities, African American communities, all communities. And one of the reasons I'm proud to serve in this administration is because I think the President is moving forward on the critical elements necessary to provide and ensure that opportunity. First and foremost, economic growth. Without growth, there is no opportunity. Second, education. I think Condi Rice said a few years ago, it's the civil rights issue of our time, because without a good education, we are not allowing our young people to seize their opportunities and pursue their dreams. And as the President mentioned, it's only by empowering parents and giving them the power to choose the education for their children that we're ever going to be able to obtain that. Third, I think, is moral discipline. And our young people, they have to have the discipline to seize the opportunity, to make momentary sacrifices for later gain. And traditionally, that has come, and people can find it perhaps from many sources, but traditionally that has come from religion, which our founders believed was the foundation of our republic. And we have to stop policies that undermine religion or relegate religion out of the public square. But now I get to my job, which is safety. Without safety, you cannot have progress. You can't have a life, a decent life in a community. And, you know, this was struck home to me 30 years ago when I visited Trenton when I was Attorney General last time, and I went to a small barber shop in an African-American neighborhood. And there were people there in their 60s and 70s, and they said, "Mr. Barr, we're in our golden years, and we are living behind bars. Look down the street. All the bars are on our windows, and the criminals run free on the street." Now, we've made a lot of progress since then. The crime rate has been cut in half. And a big part of that has been improvement in policing and the progress we've made in policing. And yes, the progress that police departments have made in building relationships with the community. I think law enforcement has understood for a long time that there is distrust in the African-American community toward the law enforcement system. And when you reflect on our history, you could understand why. Because for most of our history, just up until the last 60 years, the institutions in this country, the laws and the institutions were explicitly discriminatory. There was not equal protection of the law, by law. And it's only been since Jim Crow that our laws have been changed to provide for equal justice. And what we've had really since, and so the civil rights effort up until that time was to tear down institutions. But I don't think now is the time to be tearing down our institutions, because we've been on a march for the last 50 years of reforming our institutions. And we don't need to tear them down. We have to be mature about this, and when we see problems, we have to redouble our efforts to reform our institutions and make sure they're in sync with our values. And I don't think anyone who's honest would deny that we've made a lot of progress in policing over the last 50 years. And in fact, you know, one of the things about this episode in Minneapolis was how fast both the state and federal law enforcement responded to dealing with that action. So I think that while we saw something very bad, it has helped perhaps galvanize the will of the country to bring good out of that. And we can't let that incident obscure the fact that progress has been made, that policemen are by and large, by overwhelming majority, good, decent people who care about their community and put their lives on the line for us, their neighbors. And we can't lose sight of the fact, and can't let this event obscure the fact, that the real oppression and danger to our communities comes more from violent crime and lawlessness than it does from the police. Now, we've never had a president who's more committed to reforming law enforcement. And he's done that with the First Step Act and with the first police commission since Lyndon Johnson. And I'm very optimistic about, you know, what we're going to be able to do, given his leadership, but also given the leadership of our police forces, which around the country increasingly have become better and better led. And I think the police profession is itself committed to addressing the issues that we saw in Minneapolis and completing the process of professionalizing policing in this country. And as the president said, we're working on a number of things through the commission that he set up and also through an executive order to propel that process even faster by looking at how we can encourage the adoption of guidelines about the use of force that are acceptable both to the community and to the police profession. but also to encourage certification of police forces, and also through such activities as increasing grants to encourage the use of co-responders. More and more our police are being asked to deal with problems that hasn't previously been the problem of law enforcement. They have to deal with homeless people. They have to deal with a lot of mental health issues. They have to deal with drug addiction, the drug addicts and so forth. And providing some additional support to the police in these areas is going to be important. So let me just say that the Department of Justice is committed to support the President's efforts here, do all we can to bring good out of this bad incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Surgeon General, please, go ahead.
Secretary,
You want to go?
President's gonna
Go ahead, why don't you go, then Ben will go. Is that okay?
All right.
Good, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thank you to the panelists. I just want to start off by saying that many people across the country and across the great state of Texas are hurting right now due to the tragedy that occurred to George Floyd. And I just want to extend my condolences to the Floyd family and to the entire Texas community, because I know that you all live together, you work together, you play together, and you hurt together here in Texas. And so I want you to know that I feel that for you. The President asked me to give you a quick update on America's COVID-19 response. Thanks to cooperation with state and local partners, we're making progress against the virus. We are, and towards a safe reopening. Through strong public and private partnerships, America has now done more than 20 million tests. And that number is a big number. It's not just about the number, it's also about how many of those tests are coming back positive. We have a positive rate under 6% nationally. And from a public health perspective, if we're under 10% positive, we're doing a good job. So there's a lot of challenges out there, but I want you all to know that we are moving in the right direction. The data shows that we are moving in the right direction as a nation. And this has happened in part thanks to opening of over 500 community-based testing sites through the work of private sector partners in the United States Public Health Service, which I helped lead with Admiral Giroir. 70% of those sites are in CDC-designated vulnerable areas. That means that we're taking the testing to those who need it the most, to those who are most at risk. We also have testing at 92% of America's community health centers, which predominantly serve low-income areas and communities of color. We've helped equip our frontline workers, our healthcare heroes, with 94 million N95 respirators, 149 million surgical masks, and more than 1 billion gloves. And a large proportion of those supplies at the President and the Secretary's direction are going to nursing homes. And I just want to, I see the governor over there, I want to give you all a shout out. Texas has led the way in nursing home testing. 100% of their nursing homes have been tested. They're leading the way in testing people in corrections facilities. Over 95% of people in corrections facilities have been tested. That is something you all should be tremendously proud of. And these efforts have allowed states to proceed with a safe reopening while we work with states to monitor the incoming data. We know we're going to have clusters while we respond to spikes, and we adjust policies as needed. But I want you to know that safe reopening is crucial for other areas in health too. We need Americans to be able to return to cancer screenings. My wife just finished cancer treatment. If she'd had to wait 6 months to get her cancer screen, she might not be here today. We need people to get their surgeries. We need people to get their vaccinations. 4.2 million children are behind on vaccinations now because of the COVID closures. We know every 1% increase in unemployment equates to a 1.3% increase in suicides. 1.3% increase in suicides. So we want to reopen safely. We also have to remember that being shut down has health consequences beyond COVID. We know that being out of school is bad for your health. We need to get our kids back in school safely. have a 15, a 14, and a 10-year-old, and so can you tell I've been saying that a lot? But we know that COVID-19 has a tragically disproportionate burden on communities of color. Black Americans hospitalized at 4.5 times higher rates than whites, hospitalization rates 3.5 times higher for Hispanics than whites, and 5 times higher for American Indians and Alaska Natives. The fact is, this virus is exploiting and exacerbating pre-existing health disparities, and these disparate outcomes and opportunities for health are in part the anger, the frustration, and the fear that we're seeing manifest in protests around the country. And that's why it's important for people to know that beyond talking about the problem, at the President's direction, at Secretary Azar's direction, HHS and the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, or WARC, are focusing resources on minority communities. HHS recently allocated $15 billion to Medicaid providers and $10 billion to safety net hospitals, both groups of providers that disproportionately serve Americans of color. And I spent the last 10 years working at a safety net hospital, Eskenazi Hospital in Indianapolis. I can tell you, those are the places that are doing the work. Those are the places that at the President's direction we're focusing our resources towards. We're working with the Consortium of Black Medical Schools to fund and scale local efforts in communities that, again, reach communities of color. CDC now requires all testing data reported by states include information on race, ethnicity, and zip code, so we can continue to further refine and focus our strategy on the hardest hit communities. CMS is deregulating telemedicine to make ongoing care for many medical conditions safe, accessible, and convenient for the patients and for healthcare professionals. Again, we can't afford to let people continue to go without their care. And the administration's emphasis on public-private partnerships is allowing us to progress towards a vaccine and treatments at a record pace as a part of Operation Warp Speed. I want to add that SAMHSA has just funded 3 community behavioral health clinics right here in Texas with the CARES Act funding. Some of your congressional representatives are here. I want to say thank you to you all for passing that into the President for signing it to address COVID-19 and behavioral health needs. These facilities integrate mental health, substance abuse treatment, and physical health care in one setting and provide 24/7 crisis intervention services. Another notable mental health awareness training grant is in Austin, where funds are used to train community health officials, including law enforcement, and we have many of them in the crowd today, on recognizing signs and symptoms of mental illness and mental health crises and how to help an individual who's struggling. That's all part of reform. That's all part of reform in the positive direction, giving our frontline workers the tools and the training they need to be able to take care of these difficult situations. As Mayor Sylvester Turner said at George Floyd's funeral, we must encourage business leaders to invest in our underserved communities, and that's what the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council is all about. I have an upcoming Surgeon General's report on community health and economic prosperity, which aims to mobilize businesses to invest deeply and over time in the health of their communities. Finally, to focus on chronic conditions that disproportionately impact Black and brown people and may worsen because of COVID, Secretary Azar has instructed my office to accelerate the release of 2 calls to action. The first on maternal health, addressing the fact that women of color suffer more complications and a much higher risk of dying around childbirth. Black women are 4 to 5 times more likely to die around childbirth than white women. Native American women are more likely to die around childbirth than white women. And that's after you control for income, after you control for education, after you control for every known factor that we have. My second call to action is on hypertension control for all Americans. Hypertension is common, it's costly, and it's treatable, and yet control rates are low and stalled, especially in communities of color. So I just want to close by saying that as we reopen, the basic public health recommendations we've emphasized remain important. We've flattened the curve, but that doesn't mean that COVID has gone away, that it's any less contagious, that it's any less deadly to vulnerable communities. So if you don't want to listen to me, listen to Hall of Fame pitcher Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan filmed a PSA at the governor's direction, and he said, number 1, wash your hands. Wash them more than you've ever washed them before in your life. Number 2, follow your local and state guidelines around social distancing. This virus likes to spread person to person. So the more we can keep distance between people, especially people we don't know, the harder it is for this virus to transmit. And number 3, this isn't me speaking, this is Nolan Ryan, Hall of Fame pitcher here. When you're in a public place where it's difficult to keep a distance, like the grocery or pharmacy, The CDC recommends wearing a face covering to protect your neighbors in the event that you have COVID and you don't know it. Up to 50% of people who have COVID are asymptomatic. So thanks to the hard work of so many healthcare and public health professionals and the commitment of the American people, I want to reiterate, because you don't hear this enough, that we are making huge progress in the fight against COVID-19. And as a member of the task force, I can tell you that we frequently talk about the great work Texas has been doing up until this point to keep the people of Texas safe, to keep the most vulnerable members of their community safe. And with every American's help, with your help, Texas, we'll keep making progress. We're going to beat this virus. And thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President. Thank you, Texas.
Thank you very much, Surgeon General. Thank you. Ben Carson, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership and your courage. I don't know of anybody who could stand up to all the criticism you get every day. 24.
Do you have a choice? Thank you.
You know, our nation is continuing a path of renewal and recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. But since the beginning, the President has talked about being a champion for the forgotten men and women of this nation. That's exactly where we've been concentrating. And it's been an honor to serve in an administration with that goal. And I'm excited to see America beginning to bounce back. The infrastructure, the economic infrastructure of our country is very strong, secondary to the abolition of multitudinous regulations and targeted tax cuts. It's still there. That foundation is there, and we will be able to get back on that track pretty quickly. But to help speed this rebound, the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council was formed to really help the long-forgotten communities achieve economic opportunity. And it has been refocused at your direction to help America's hardest-hit communities achieve economic recovery, overcome health disparities, and thrive through educational and workforce advancement. Now, to stimulate economic development and entrepreneurship, the Council has worked to set aside additional payment protection funding for our nation's low-income minority communities and provided technical support to help these communities to access this funding. They have stated that during the first round, the money wasn't getting to them. We are addressing that, and I want to thank all the different agencies. Virtually every governmental agency has contributed significantly to refocusing and addressing these problems. The groundbreaking initiative known as Opportunity Zones, which encourages long-term investment in the forgotten communities, will also be expanded to include more of the underserved areas. Another major initiative, improving health and public safety, comes with several administrative and legislative proposals. For example, we believe both telemedicine and increased use of mobile care can be major catalysts in our mission to overcome health disparities in underserved communities. Those are things that can actually be done very rapidly to bring health care to people who've previously been neglected. And to further this effort, we're also committed to reforming the infrastructure of our public health data system, addressing chronic conditions in at-risk populations, and working to address food insecurity in underserved communities. That means healthy food